All right, I think we are ready to go. Hello to everybody that's just joined. Today we're going to be hosting a Bee City Spotlight webinar to feature pollinator initiatives in the city of Mississauga. The aim of these Bee City Spotlight webinars is to showcase actions that are being taken in municipalities across Canada to protect pollinators. As one last reminder, if anyone would like to tune in French, please click on the interpretation icon at the bottom of the screen and select French from there. My colleague's just going to repeat that in French.
Donc, je rappelle que si vous souhaitez écouter ce webinaire en français, il suffit de cliquer sur l'icône d'interprétation en bas de votre écran et sélectionner le français.
Perfect. Thank you, Adele. And before we get into the content, I'd just like to begin with an acknowledgement of the lands that we're meeting virtually to discuss today. So we acknowledge the lands which constitute the present-day city of Mississauga as being part of the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat and Wyandot nations. We recognize these peoples and their ancestors as peoples who inhabited these lands since time immemorial. The city of Mississauga is home to many global Indigenous peoples. As a municipality, the city of Mississauga is actively working towards reconciliation by confronting their past and present, providing space for Indigenous peoples within their territory to recognize and uphold the treaty rights and to support Indigenous peoples. The city of Mississauga formally recognizes the Anishinaabe origins of their name and continues to make Mississauga a safe space for all Indigenous peoples. And I know we're participating today from all across Canada, so I invite you to reflect on the land that you are seated on, and as people on this land, may we all dedicate ourselves to moving forward in partnership, collaboration, and reconciliation as we learn together and contemplate the possibilities ahead. Today, we're delighted to have two speakers from Mississauga, Ontario, who will share Mississauga pollinator initiatives with us from the organizations that they represent. I'll introduce each of them more thoroughly in a moment, but we have Felicia Radassao from the city of Mississauga and Jeanne McRight from the local nonprofit Blooming Boulevards. Felicia has been working at the city of Mississauga since 2020 in the Parks, Forestry, and Environment Division on the Woodlands and Natural Areas team. She has a bachelor's degree in Environment and Resource Studies from the University of Waterloo, and has over a decade of experience working in the ecological restoration field. Prior to working at the city, Felicia was an assistant terrestrial ecologist at the Royal Botanical Gardens, where she assisted in various monitoring and restoration projects, including forest health surveys, breeding bird surveys, tallgrass prairie restoration, reforestation, volunteer planting events, and invasive species removals. Since working at the city, a few of her responsibilities have included leading tree planting events and plant giveaways through the city's Million Trees program, implementing naturalization projects with contractors, planning and implementing restoration work within the city's natural areas and parks, and facilitating the recent controlled burns at Jack Darling Memorial Park and Lorne Park Prairie. Currently, she's the acting natural heritage coordinator and assists in the plan review process for development applications that could impact the city's natural heritage system. Her home role is the Woodlands and Natural Areas technician with a focus on ecology. Jeanne is the founder of Blooming Boulevards, a professional visual artist and photographer with an honors BFA. She taught visual arts for 21 years at the Etobicoke School of the Arts, was a founding director of Art Space, and was a program advisor for the Ontario College of Art and Design at Sheridan College. Jeanne is a Mississauga Master Gardener and holds a horticulture diploma from the University of Guelph. She focuses on biodiversity conservation, specializing in native plant propagation, habitat restoration, and naturalized landscaping. She is the recipient of 2 awards of merit and an Environmental Awareness Award from the Credit Valley Conservation Authority. In 2015, she initiated an amendment to Mississauga's encroachment bylaw, permitting residents to create boulevard gardens. Gardening is Jeanne's joy and passion, but more than that, she is a deeply committed advocate for environmentally sustainable horticultural practices. So that covers our introductions. I expect we'll have time at the end for questions. So if anybody has questions, please type them into the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. and we'll get to as many as we can at the end. And with all of that said, I'll turn it over to Felicia to kick us off.
Thank you, Jordan. Just bear with me as I share my screen and bring up the presentation. So good afternoon, everyone. As Jordan had mentioned, my name is Felicia and I work in the Parks, Forestry, and Environment Division at the City of Mississauga. Today, I'm going to be going over some of the strategies that the city has that relates to pollinators, as well as going into some of our pollinator projects that we have going on as well. So just briefly, I'm going to go over these strategies and the policy. I believe Jordan will also be putting links to these in the chat for anyone who would like to see them, but they are available on the City of Mississauga's website, along with a lot of other strategies and plans. So please feel free to check them out. Within Mississauga's official plan, there is a section called Chapter 6, which pertains to natural heritage policies. And this is where it states that Mississauga will protect, enhance, restore, and expand the natural heritage system. Underneath that, there is the Natural Heritage and Urban Forest Strategy, which is basically the city's approach to managing and stewarding natural areas throughout the city, as well as increasing the urban tree canopy cover citywide as well. One of the newer strategies that we have is the Invasive Species Management Plan and Implementation Strategy. Basically, this identifies priority sites for non-native invasive plant control, as well as identifying some, what we call them the big 6 species, to help really focus our efforts, because as I'm sure most of us in the audience know, there's a lot of non-native invasive plants. So how is the city addressing pollinators? Well, there are different divisions and teams within the city outside of forestry, and there are multiple pollinator related projects that they're working on. One out of many examples is Transportation and Works. They approve boulevard garden permits and actually work with Jeanne from Blooming Boulevards on those. And in recognition of the city's earlier efforts and current efforts to help pollinators in the city received the Bee City designation in 2019. For today's presentation, though, I'm going to go into more details on the projects that our team, the Woodlands and Natural Areas team within forestry, are involved in. And basically the importance of these 3 types of projects is that we are trying to enhance and protect rare and unique ecosystems for pollinators, such as the tallgrass prairie at Jack Darling Memorial Park. We're also looking to create and improve pollinator habitat, such as through the 1 Million Trees program. And then we're also creating new pollinator features and engagement opportunities for the public. And an example of that would be the Victory Park raised pollinator beds in Malton. So to jump right into the first project, is the tallgrass prairie located at Jack Darling Memorial Park. Back in 1996, a few remnant prairie species were found naturally occurring, which makes sense because this park is located off the shores of Lake Ontario. The soils are sandy. Historically, this area would have had more tallgrass prairies and savannas. And this is why this site was chosen for restoration for tallgrass prairie. So in 2012 was the first prescribed or controlled burn. Following that burn were some prairie plantings, and then a few more burns occurred after that. In 2017, prairie vegetation monitoring started. Since then, we've been doing that monitoring annually, and it's just monitoring the vegetation at the site and tracking it over time. This prairie, or what would be called true tallgrass prairie, currently is just under 1 hectare, but it has the potential through future restoration efforts to expand to be about 1.4 hectares in size. So in 2021, there was a prescribed burn that the city conducted, and basically, if anyone is in the audience is thinking of planning to do one of these, my advice would be to plan the year before and in advance as much as you can. basically, the first thing that needs to be done is securing one of the very few qualified contractors to perform this kind of work within a municipality, especially in Southern Ontario, and making sure that they can fit the project within their busy schedules. Also, if you're a municipality looking to do this, you would want your council, members of council to approve it, as well as fire, making sure the Peel Police is aware, as well as other divisions who would be directly impacted at the city, such as Parks and Forestry. Once a contractor is secured, they basically produce a burn plan, send it to the PMR or the person most responsible to review and to share with others, such as fire. Once that gets approved, that opens the floodgates to even more communication, and communication is key and can take months. So basically alerting everybody from local residents to residents who might be coming from far away entering the park. So we use signage, mail, pamphlets, email blasts, social media blasts, mailing lists, you name it, we basically did it, as well as contacting known other park users such as Leash Free. After snow melt, that's when site conditions are monitored for the ideal weather and site conditions for a burn, and then making sure that a burn permit is secured. These are some photos from the 2021 burn. And the reason why we used controlled or prescribed burns is because it is the natural periodic disturbance that maintains tallgrass prairies. And as you can see in this photo, the fire is removing the vegetation buildup from previous years. It's also removing any small woody plants coming in. It helps control non-native plants as well. And once the fire is done, that blackened soil now allows prairie seeds that are present there to have the seed soil contact. And because the soil is black, it will be warmer due to solar radiation after the burn. And that basically creates the ideal conditions for prairie plant germination. So following the burn in 2021, we started doing some photo monitoring just to track the green up process. So you can see that on the right, those series of photos. And that took place only over a few months. So it's quite incredible to see the change of the plant diversity there and growth. Following that, we did, again, prairie monitoring as well, prairie vegetation monitoring. And in the bottom larger photo, you can basically see the burn line. You can see what side was burned and what side was not burned. On the burn side, you have more tallgrass prairie species, such as big blue stem, little blue stem, and Indian grass, and some coneflower. On the side that wasn't burned, there are some common milkweeds, which is great, but there's also a lot of cool season non-native grasses. And that was why we couldn't burn there in 2021, was because those cool season grasses greened up too fast. So this is just a video, and I'm hoping it's going to play, that I took when visiting the prairie. And basically, I took this video because I couldn't believe how alive the site was. There were butterflies, there were flies of different species, there were wasps of different species. You can see one right there. There were bumblebees of different species and other species of bees, ants, beetles, you name it, they were there pollinating. It was really exciting to see. Unfortunately, the video doesn't show them too much detail, but hopefully you can see all the blobs moving around. So in the areas where we couldn't burn, so those cool season grass areas, we've been experimenting over the last year and this year, using tarps to solarize or to cook the grass. And last year it was extremely successful. We put out 2 tarps, and then we removed the tarps after a few months. The grass underneath was dead, and then we planted them with prairie plant plugs. Did some watering, and from here on out, we will be doing some site checks. For this year, we're doing the same thing. We already have the tarps out, it's already doing their thing, and we're planning to do some prairie plug plantings in June. For the second project that I'm going to be talking about that benefits pollinators is the 1 Million Trees program. This program officially kicked off in in 2013. And the goal is to plant 1 million trees by 2032. This year is actually, it's the 1 Million Trees program's 10-year anniversary. And as of this, so far this spring, we've already reached that 500,000 tree mark, which is pretty incredible. I also want to do a shout out to the fact that we do receive tree numbers from other divisions and teams at the city, even outside of forestry. We also get tree numbers from our from contractors that are doing tree plantings. We also receive tree numbers from the region of Peel, and as well as our partners, such as the conservation authorities. So it is a really big, robust program. So because of that, I'm only going to be talking about the aspects that our team specifically focuses on, or mostly focuses on, which are the volunteer tree planting events and the plant giveaways. So last year, through volunteer tree planting events, we were able to plant over 17,000 native trees and shrubs throughout the city of Mississauga. And we also engaged with over 4,500 volunteers, which is pretty incredible. All of these plantings, and I should also mention all of these projects, are on city owned and managed lands. We don't just go planting wherever. And for these volunteer tree planting events, there are three parts, or three types. There are public tree planting events, such as the ones that occurred recently during Earth Day. There are community group tree planting events and corporate group events as well. For the tree giveaways, we gave away 480 free trees for residents to plant on their own properties. And we did a few wildflower giveaways as well. One occurred in June during Pollinator Week, and a few occurred in the fall, for a total of 500 plants that were given away. And the target, for these wildflower giveaways are any residents who have balconies or small properties where a native tree or shrub just wouldn't work because there's not enough space. This is a great opportunity for residents to become involved with helping pollinators within the city, and as well as long-term creating kind of more pollinator pathways throughout such an urbanized area. For anyone who's in the audience who may have taken a plant or tree or helped us with their volunteer tree planting events, thank you so much. It is very much appreciated. Cannot do this without the help of the community. So how do we pick these planting sites? Well, basically we look to see if there are any synergies with existing strategies and plans. We look to see if what the proximity is to the natural heritage system. Are there any natural features within a said park? Is there a water course? If there's a water course, can we increase a naturalized buffer to increase habitat for pollinators and other wildlife, and also benefit the water as well? If there's an isolated woodland in a city park, can we make it bigger? Can we expand it, increase the urban canopy cover, as well as shelter and foraging for pollinators and wildlife? We also look for areas with low tree canopy cover, and if there are opportunities to plant in those parks. Sometimes we also receive requests either from internal staff, people on our team. Sometimes our conservation authority partners might mention areas that planting would be beneficial. Sometimes ward counselors will even reach out to us asking if we can plant more in a specific park or area, as well as residents. So we take all that into consideration, and that basically makes this proposed list of sites to plant in the future. And we collect all of this throughout the year. And then in the wintertime, we send that list of sites, of proposed sites, to internal divisions and teams for internal review. Once we receive comments back from those teams and divisions, we then create the list of the areas that we will be planting in the following year or 2 years out. So when it comes to selecting plants, we try to go to the site and see what native trees and shrubs are doing well already. And then we will base our plant selection for that planting event based on what we see. If we're starting completely from scratch and it's a total turf conversion, Then we might try and find historical vegetation data to see what used to exist here before they got cut down. And we also will look to see if there are any remnant woodlands as well, and see what native species are doing well there. We are also trying to incorporate more wildflower plantings into our tree and shrub plantings because it can take so long for young trees to become a woodland. And in the meantime, they can provide even more benefit for both pollinators, wildlife, and even people walking by. We also get our plant stock that's locally sourced, of course, native species. And then we also look at the conditions of the site. If it's wet, we then will pick more wet loving species. If it's really dry, we go for the really hardy stuff like gray dogwood and red oaks. So what do we do after we plant? Well, if we did plantings in the spring, which we always do, then we will water during the summer, especially last year with the heat and the drought. Watering is a top priority for our team in the summer. The following year, we do site inspections. So we will go to visit all the sites that had been planted the previous year. And then we see what kind of maintenance needs are required. Sometimes it's more watering. Sometimes it's trimming around smaller plants because they're being kind of shaded out by competing vegetation. Sometimes it's adding more tree guards or removing tree guards if it's a older planting that occurred maybe 5, 7+ years ago. We also will check to see if there are any invasive species that are coming up at these sites, including the big 6. And if the population is small enough and it's feasible to do so, we will mechanically remove them. We also look for bindweed because there's a lot of bindweed in the city parks, and we try and pull those off of any smaller plants that they are smothering. So here are just 2 examples of how the 1 Million Trees program has created more habitat for pollinators, as well as increasing tree canopy cover. There are hundreds of plantings in hundreds of parks, so this is a very small snapshot. But as you can see from Mississauga Valley, you can see that the existing woodland was extended with those plantings that had occurred in 2019. And then at Ashwood Park, you can see that in 2014, there were a handful of park trees. And then after the naturalization planting, now there's a small woodland there. So for the final project that I want to talk about today is the Victory Park pollinator beds. This one was actually a really fun project that involved forestry, parks, and partnering with blooming boulevards. And this was made possible through the TD Green Spaces and Arbor Day Foundation grant. And this was a component of the green infrastructure part of the grant. And this is located at Victory Park in Malton. Anyone can go and visit it. So for this grant, we partnered with Jeanne from Blooming Boulevards, as I had no idea how to build or design a garden bed. And we bounced ideas off each other for designs, as well as where the best places to get soil from for such a big project. What plant species were there? Blooming Boulevard volunteers helped with designing the actual layout of the planting plan for these beds. And then later that year, Blooming Boulevards came out with us and we seeded the beds, and they also provided the seed for the beds as well. And then recommendations on how to protect these seeds over winter also came from Jeanne. So I went out and bought some hardware cloth, and we went back and put that all there. And the garden beds were made in-house by our carpentry staff. At the raised pollinator beds at Victory Park, there is a sign structure that was also constructed by our carpentry staff. And there are 3 panels with information for the local community or anyone visiting to read. One panel is basically talking about what are these, what is a pollinator garden, and how can you have one too. And the second panel is showcasing some of the plants that should be in the raised pollinator beds and just giving a bit more information about them. And then the final panel is talking about what pollinators are and how we can help them. On these panels, there is recognition of Mississauga's designation as a bee city, as well as a shout out to our funders. So last year in the early, well, not early, maybe mid-spring, we took off the hardware cloth off of the beds. And then we watered a few times over the summer. And once the weeds and other plants were large enough where we could really tell them apart and felt confident to weed, we went out a couple times to weed these beds, as you can see in the bottom photo or photos. And after the weeding, there was some pretty big gaps in the beds. So parks graciously infilled those gaps with native plants based on the communications from earlier, which was extremely grateful that they helped us out with that. So for this year, we will be continuing to check the beds. We will be continuing to perform maintenance as needed and watering as well. These are pictures of the beds that before they had their infill plantings. I haven't been back out yet to take photos this year yet. And you can see the sign structure as well. And with that, I will leave you with some photos of Jack Darling Prairie, as well as 3 wasp species, which in that video were some of the blobs moving around. My contact information is on the screen, so if there's anyone who would like to talk more about what I discussed today, feel free to reach out. And thank you so much for listening. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll pass it on to Jeanne.
Well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you to Felicia. That was really interesting, especially about the controlled burn. I love finding out the details about that, Felicia. Thank you, Jordan, and thank you, Bee City Canada, for all that you do. You're amazing. It's just so exciting, and we were happy to be part of this. Thanks for having me here today. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, there we go. So I'm the head, founder, and president of Blooming Boulevards. And as Jordan said, this is a community not-for-profit corporation from the province of Ontario. We have a board of directors. And I hope that people can see this okay. I thought it was supposed to be full screen. Okay, hang on, I'll make it full screen. There we go. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the organization and what we do. That's what I'm doing here today to do. So we raise awareness of the need to help pollinating species, especially, but we stopped calling our gardens pollinator gardens. We call them habitat gardens instead, because we wanted people to be aware of the connections between the entire ecological picture, the community of life that pollinators live and surround themselves with, and they need in order to survive. So we make gardens. We teach people the skills in which to grow plants and to make their gardens. And of course, we could go out and collect the seeds and we grow native plants. So we're keeping very, very busy with this. We're all about connection. We connect neighborhoods and to nature. And one of the reasons why, okay, there's a slide of downtown Mississauga in 1973, and you can see it's surrounded by woodlands and agricultural areas. There's a lot of green space here. Of course, the forests have been removed by this point, but there's still places where wildlife can live. Okay, so now in 2023, this is about the same scene, and you can see the intensive urbanization that's happened in this area. And the result is that we have a severe habitat loss, and we have what the habitat is intensely fragmented. In other words, there is more space between these little parks and neighborhoods than is reachable by many populations, many species of our native bees, for example. Many of the 300 and some native species, the bees that are native to Mississauga, have a flight range of between 100 and 300 meters. Okay, so that the parks are further than that, and therefore these bee populations are stranded. The larger areas, for example, this is Riverview Park, still follow the river. There's a lot of edge habitat here, and so, but there's a huge amount of wildlife, but it can't get to the other larger areas. For example, the areas that Felicia is talking about at Jack Darling Park, which is south of this where this map shows, they can't get there. And so if there is an environmental stressor or a disease, then inbred populations are weak. They have lost their ability to, again, to be resilient to these stresses, and they will weaken and die. Okay, so this is what we are trying to address at Blooming Boulevards, is we're trying to provide a network pathways so that the insects and other wildlife species can navigate. They can move from one larger patch of habitat to another larger patch of habitat. And the important thing about these this network is that it provide for the animals' foraging needs, their nesting needs, their winter protection. It's got all of the needs of life for the insects in particular need to be there. And so that means using native plants. The sustainability is no longer about doing less harm, it's about doing more good. And this is how we do more good. We grow native plants, we create habitat gardens along the city streets, along the municipal right-of-way. We're funded by the city of Mississauga. This year we have a close to $50,000 Trillium Foundation grant. And so I'll tell you more about that in a minute. We have volunteers who grow the plants, who propagate the plants from seeds that we gather right here in Mississauga for the most part. So we're all about connection, as I said. An important aspect of our connections is reaching out into our community. And so we have booths at public spaces. Every time we respond to every invitation we get, and we set up a booth, we distribute our information, we sign up people for memberships and take garden applications. We just spread the word. We also are able to sell some of the seeds from our gardens, and sometimes we also sell plants. We connect with our larger community in various ways. One of our big fundraisers is our big blockbuster native plant sale. We usually sell somewhere around 2,000 plants at our plant sale, and it's very popular. People come from all over to buy the plants. We connect with our local organizations, and these are organizations, for example, ACER is a tree planting organization here in Mississauga who helps out. They work together with the city, again, the Million Tree Project and various provincially funded initiatives. This was Project Crossroads. So my husband and I are on the left of this group picture. We provide native plants. ACER plants the trees. We provide the native plants to plant around the trees. So we're not just planting trees, we're creating a habitat community. And we also connect with EcoSource, which is a food and urban agriculture organization with community gardens, and we set up and help ACER or EcoSource establish new community gardens, and we help to renovate and enlarge existing pollinator gardens. Okay, so these are pollinators, of course, which increase food production significantly, and we want to make sure that people who are growing food understand the role that our native pollinators play in the output of their gardens. We connect with our city various ways. We're working with parks and forestry in a partnership type of relationship so that we're providing plants. Felicia mentioned plant giveaways. So this weekend we're providing 450 of our native plants in a parks and forestry event, invasive species fair here in Mississauga. Okay, and this was an exhibition called We Are Resilient that we participated in. We actually won a prize with our story about our boulevard gardens and how they make our organization resilient to climate change. So we also this year received a Trillium Foundation grant to hire consultants. We have hired 2 consultant teams and to conduct a feasibility study to set up something near and dear to our hearts, and that's a municipal community greenhouse with something that we feel that we need and our city needs. This will enable us to extend our plant production for larger, more ambitious projects. Teaching and learning, again, this is another way to connect. It's very important that people understand what they are doing and that they learn, and it helps people to motivate people. So this is where the magic happens. You don't want to talk at a person, you want to talk with them, you want to help them to really understand how important this is. So I am the person who does most of the workshops, the teaching, especially during COVID. We all became tech wizards using Zoom. Well, at least that's what we were trying to be anyway. So I ended up doing each year 30 or more virtual presentations. And now, of course, we're doing in-person educational presentations too. But this is hosted by Blooming Boulevards, but it's also hosted by a variety of other groups across the country. And we get people, probably somewhere around 300 to 500 registrants for my typical workshops, all located all over the world. Okay, so they feature an emphasis on relevance, especially with a variety of topics, and in particular topics that encourage the engagement of the participants. So we have an extremely active chat with lively questions and people responding with answers. And then people email on me afterwards with questions. By the way, you're welcome to, if you're listening here and you've got questions that aren't answered today, you're welcome to email Blooming Boulevards, and I'm good at getting back at people. Okay, so well-researched science-based content is very important when we put together our presentations, and we have on our website available accessible handouts and follow-up support for your questions. And so this is typically some of the things, the topics, and some of the look of some of our educational material. We have a YouTube channel, Facebook, and again, all the Zoom that we do, monthly newsletter, you name it, we've got it. Teaching and learning. So this is our education program's reach across North America. You can see it's centered in the eastern part of North America, but it goes all the way up north into the Northwest Territories. It goes down into Florida and into California. And now we've got a reach. We've got people who tune in from Australia and New Zealand and Japan and Europe and India. It's amazing. When one tugs at a single thing in nature, he finds it attached to the rest of the world. So what starts our garden program is collecting seeds. There's nothing more wonderful than a seed. And it sounds very trite, but it is true. You look at a tiny seed and you imagine what it's going to be and what its potential is. So we collect seed ethically, which means that we don't take too many from any given spot. We make sure that we take the seeds and we collect the seeds with permission from the landowners. We make sure that there's a large population of those native plants, and then we choose seed parts of those plants at random. So our goal is to preserve the adaptive genome that's locally adapted to our southern Mississauga site. Okay, and so we have a volunteer program where the volunteers are taught how to do this. They are supervised while they go out and collect. And here we are at Jack Darling Park with written permission from Parks and Forestry in the city of Mississauga to go there and do this. Okay, see, they're little tiny little bags of seeds. Okay, so those are enough seeds to grow 10,000 plants. Okay, you don't need very many. One little flower goes a long way. So the seed volunteers collect, they clean them, they clean the seeds, they stratify, they package and label seeds. And I should mention, because people always ask about this, do all your seeds come from your local areas? And I have to say no, because we don't have those plants yet. Okay, they have been extirpated from the area. They used to grow here and now they don't. So we have to purchase those seeds, and we find sources that collect their seeds from the wild locally. And we always check to make sure where the provenance of the seed source before we buy. Okay, so here's our volunteers preparing the seeds. And then, of course, we sow the seeds. The volunteers are able to, we have propagating teams as well as our seed team. So this is a little tiny corner of my own propagation setup. I grow myself about 3,500 plants. The volunteers do the rest. So from 2019 to 2023, our inception was 2019. So we're 4 years old as of May 31st. That's our 4th birthday. So in 4 years, Blooming Boulevards has grown over 30,000 flower and grass seedlings, we are proud to say. And this is all volunteer propagation, people working in their homes. Selecting species native to the Credit River watershed, and we have carefully researched the appropriateness of the species that we use, and including double checking with Parks and Forestry to make sure that they're okay to use on municipal property, and are making sure we stick to our ecoregion, which here in Toronto and Golden Horseshoe is ER7E-4. Okay, we make sure that our plants provide abundant pollen and nectar across the growing season, that they have a succession of bloom to help the emergence of the timing of the emergence of the various pollinating insects, and that they are in the plants that are installed in the appropriate sites so that they will do well, given the type of soil and lighting and water conditions they find on the site. So then we have a propagation training program, of course, and all of this happens on video during COVID. We couldn't talk to people, so we made all these videos about how to propagate plants under lights, indoors and outdoors as well. That worked out very well. Our families help. This is my then 8-year-old granddaughter. She's 11 now. She knows the scientific names of all the plants, recognizes them at sight, and knows just as well as any adult how to take care of them. Volunteers help with transplanting, labeling, and sorting the plants. And then we go ahead when we have our plants and we make the gardens. And in the spring, at the end of the day, you should smell like dirt. I love this quote by Margaret Atwood. So between May and July each year, Blooming Boulevards donates plants, advice, and support for the creation of new residential boulevard gardens and native plantings in city parks across the city of Mississauga. We believe in up close and personal, and the advantage of a garden on a boulevard is that it is immediately rewarding to people who are our garden stewards. They are taking care of a garden that is not on their property. With love and care, they have come forward, dug out the grass, put in the plants, weeded and watered, and make sure the garden thrives. So in our first year, or 2 years, our inception was 2019. 2019, we only had put in 13 gardens, okay. By 2020, we had 52. By 2021, we had 132 gardens, and you can see on the map where they're located all over the city. Last year, we had a total of 208, and this year we'll have 300 gardens. So that in 4 years, 300 gardens. Okay, we feel that this is not enough. We can't just sit back and congratulate ourselves. There's so much more that we would like to be doing. Okay, and that's where the municipal greenhouse comes in handy. Okay, if we are able to produce more plants, we can put in more gardens and we can do more. Okay, so we facilitate Boulevard garden hubs, which create the habitat links. And so, for example, this is a property owned by Jitendra Chaudhary and his family. So we go and do a site visit first, and you can see here in Mississauga, it's on Britannia Road, which is a very wide throughway, windy. It happens to have a public school, a middle school right across the street from it. Okay, with a park on either end. Okay, but the parks on either end are too far away. Again, they're more than 100 meters away. So here's a perfect avenue to put a pollinator garden on. So the family, Jitendra's family, applied for a garden. We went, did the site visit, provided them with plants, and the whole family turned out to install the plants. Neighbors come to look, they're curious, they ask questions. This is what the garden looked like at the end of the first year. So it flowered, there were plenty of butterflies and bees buzzing around and other pollinators. Neighbors stopped by, they were curious. More people signed up for gardens along the street. Okay, and this is the look of the garden the second year. So at this point, it's 2023, along this stretch of road, because of Jitendra's garden, we have at least 8 more gardens along the stretch of road, and then others, family and friends of those gardeners, have applied for gardeners. So it's like throwing a pebble into a pond. Okay, there's a ripple effect. When people walk by, they're walking their dogs, they're riding their bikes, they're riding on the bus, and see these gardens, they want one too. Even the middle school across the street started up an eco club and put in a pollinator garden. And that's how this happens. All about connection. So our gardens are for everyone. Garden stewards work solo. Sometimes they get together. So people with adjoining properties will have a strip between their properties that they will put a pollinator garden on, or the habitat garden, I should say. They can be tiny if they don't have much space. And you can notice the grass, the border. We always leave a border. Again, this is following the city's bylaw and the Boulevard garden permit, making sure that the plants don't overhang sidewalk or street. So David's family garden, of course, they have little tiny children. They all read the brochure, took a look at the pictures in the brochure, and looked at the cups, and now they are able to watch the plants grow and admire the pageant of nature that's unfolding before their eyes. It's wonderful. And all while this is happening, if David and his family needs any advice and what to do, if they need more plants, they can come to us. Gardens are made by groups such as churches, schools, and other organizations. So we provide the plants. If it is not on municipal property, this aids our fundraising because they pay a small fee for the plants. But we are able to provide them with a planting bed design and a plant list and all the other support needed to make sure this happens. And in the case of this church, part of the property was on municipal property, so that we had a permit process to go through, and we helped them with that. So we work with parks, and this was the result in our founding year. We worked it happened in the fall. We got a small projects grant, and we had the community volunteers build the raised beds, fill them with soil. We sowed them with seed. We had at least 150 volunteers working on this project. And then on our YouTube channel, there's a wonderful video showing the whole trajectory of the project. So this was in Spruce Park in 2019, and it looks like this at the last fall. It is absolutely beautiful. The community loves it. And we have just received a Parks People grant to enlarge this garden. And we will be doing that this fall when school's back in session and we could use those kids again. So recognition and awards for Blooming Boulevards, and again, without our volunteers, we'd be nowhere. So we really want to make sure we recognize them, plus all of our supporters. And we received a $10,000 environmental community grant we have for the past 2 years. And before that, it was a $5,000 grant. And then our Resilient Communities Fund grant from the Ontario Trillium Foundation for $49,800 for our feasibility study for the greenhouse. Okay, and Lorraine Johnson and her book, Garden for the Rusty Patch Bumblebee, Lorraine Johnson and Sheila Colla have included a feature on Blooming Bull on the Spruce Park Garden, and then Jatendra's wonderful Boulevard Garden, which was extremely nice. It's a great book. And Friends of the Credit Conservation Award last summer was awarded to Blooming Boulevards for environmental awareness. So we're very proud of this and thankful.
I have had in my journey about learning about native plants. I had not understood the value that they contribute to the environment. I had not understood how, when they say that you support pollinators, how many pollinators that means. These smooth asters were 100% covered in bees, as were the other asters, as were the other native plants as they were in bloom this summer. So I would like to nod a thank you to Blooming Boulevards to introduce me to this journey. It's been an absolute pleasure.
So we're all about connecting neighborhoods to nature through our gardens, through our education programs, through community outreach, and through our environmental advocacy. And that's it. Happy to answer questions. I'll get to stop my share now.
Great. Thank you to both of you for the awesome presentations and all the awesome work that you're doing to support pollinators. It's really, really exciting for me to listen to these presentations and learn even more. I see we've got 5 minutes for some questions. We've got some good ones that have come in. So I see one likely for Jeanne. With the Boulevard Habitat Gardens, how do you deal with salt and snow clearing? Have you been able to work with road clearance contractors to divert piled snow to the other side of the road, for instance?
No diverting the snow piles. No, the photo of the Boulevard Garden that I showed you in my slide is my garden, one of the photos, and Jatendra's garden. No special protection is needed for salt or piles of snow. The plants are drought. We select plants that are suitable for that site. And these are drought tolerant, salt resistant species. You can find a list of these on our website.
Perfect. And another question, do you find that butterflies or other pollinators are being hit by vehicles close to roadways?
Well, there's no real way for me to know. I don't go out in the street and look for dead butterflies and bees. But I would say that I do know that bees, I don't know about butterfly eyesight, but I know that bees are the superheroes of the animal world in terms of their ability to see movement when they are moving quickly. They can easily detect something that's coming at them and move out of the way. So I wouldn't worry about bees. All the other insects, I don't know.
Yeah, that feels like whenever this question comes up, my first thought is always to just the benefits of all of the habitat in these areas close to the roadways just so outweighs any potential cost. A question that I also have, Jeanne gets 300 to 500 participants for virtual workshops. Someone wants to clarify that and ask, what is the level of marketing and social media to get that many participants?
We advertise everywhere. Okay, garden making, or again, our website gets, the advertisements on our website, Master Gardener site. We have lots of social media and we put the advertisement up. This is our 4th year. So we have developed a kind of a clientele. We put this on Facebook and various Facebook groups. People share like crazy. That's how.
Very cool. And I see one other question. Do you have suggestions on how we can spread more awareness to folks who are interested in hobby honeybee keeping about the risks to other pollinators and native plant species that they could be competing with?
That's a hard one. It's just like changing minds anywhere. You need to, as far as I'm concerned, you need to, rather than threaten, you need to make sure that people understand the advantages of the native species and how that compares with the honeybee. Okay. What will happen if native species disappear? And how do the honeybees compete with these native species and harm them, essentially? So a lot of this has to do with raising awareness and increasing the understanding of how this works. So that's educational.
And then I'll just ask one more. I see that Felicia has answered lots of questions in the Q&A, which is fantastic. But just in case anyone missed the written response, someone asked that they're curious how many plants are lost in the first year of some of these plantings or by the next spring.
Well, for a second, I thought you were going to read my answer. Sorry. It really, what I had typed is, it really depends on the site. Some sites are more like Mars than others, in the sense of just being not friendly to plants. We find also that in the spring we have, or sorry, the fall plantings, we have more success with survivorship. So on average, it's between 70 to 90%. Some sites might even be lower, depending again, like how bad is it? But oftentimes, on average, it's much higher than that.
Mm-hmm. And I see it's 1:30, so I'll ask one last question that's come in. I believe for Jeanne, how much weeding do the Boulevard gardens require? And do you find that the garden stewards remain committed to keeping up with the weeding?
For the most part, and this is the good thing about having the garden close to the house, where they see it every day. Okay, it's convenient. The keeping up with the weeding is not that difficult if they properly prepared the site before planting. And that means clearing out all the vegetation, including the roots. Okay, so if you start with a kind of a clean garden area, that makes it much more helpful. For the first 2 years, we mulch, and then we keep at those little seedlings that come flying in from the weeds. The other important strategy when you're planting, installing plants, is that you plant them on 1 foot centers. Okay, so 30 centimeters, you plant them close together. You want them to be densely planted. You want to allow them to, after their first or second year, you want to allow those seeds to fall down so that they will make seed babies and then sort of push and pull themselves. And essentially, you saw the image of Jitendra's second year garden, so that it becomes very full. The plants will outcompete the weeds. The other important issue in our boulevard gardens, because these tend to be very tough plants that need lower nutrients, that you don't fertilize and you make the soil overly rich on the surface, which favors weeds. Okay, because these are deep rooted plants that we give you. And what good is this rich soil surface? It's more the compost and allowing those roots to go down that's going to make them successful. And if you amend the soil over the top, say 3 to 6 inches, the weeds are going to be very happy, but the plants themselves, their roots are, a meter down. So those are all strategies and that we help people to understand when we're helping them install gardens.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I see a couple of questions have come in, but we are a couple minutes past, so I'd encourage anyone that's asked questions to send an email. But yeah, thank you so much to both of you for speaking today and for the really important work that both of you are doing in Mississauga, and Jeanne apparently all across the world in terms of reaching even New Zealand, which is amazing. And of course, I'd like to thank everybody that's tuned in today. Really appreciate that. This webinar was recorded both in English, and also the French interpretation has been recorded. So we're going to get both of those up on the BCity Canada YouTube page, and likely follow up next week with the recording links to your email. And aside from that, yeah, thank you for attending. That concludes our webinar. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and stay tuned for any upcoming BCity webinars. And if you live in Mississauga, apply for a Boulevard garden.
Thank you for having us,
Thank
Jordan.
you.